What is going on, and welcome to another episode of the Time Killers podcast, a show about the games, movies, and everything we kill time with. My name is Neil Rivera, and I'm killing time with a man who has been surviving out on the cold streets of post-apocalyptic Chernobyl. It's Matthew Field.
Not many streets out there anymore. It's mostly just marshes and stuff.
Yeah, it turns out it's a bunch of just destroyed roads and infrastructure buildings, and then not only that, but like just weird anomalies that kill you any chance that you get. So yeah, we're going to be talking about S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, the Cost of Hope DLC, and the accompanying 2.0 update that came along with it. I've also been playing through Mortal Shell, but before we do that, we're going to talk about Gamescom Opening Night Live. We are recording this on Tuesday after Gamescom Opening Night Live wrapped up earlier today. So Matthew and I are going to go through our highlights of the show and just give our thoughts on it overall. So yeah, thanks for being here. We're glad that you're here to kill time with us. So before we jump into the show, I want to remind you guys that you can listen to past episodes. Find us on your social network of choice at timekillerspod.com. Let us know whatever you're killing time with and be a part of the show. Go to ask.timekillerspod.com. Let us know what you're playing, watching, whatever you're killing time with. We want to know. And then subscribe and leave us a review wherever you guys listen to your podcast. A lot of you guys seem to be listening on Apple Podcasts, so that's a huge deal for us. If you guys leave a review, give us 5 stars, thumbs up, all of that fun stuff. All right, Matthew, Gamescom Opening Night Live. It is one of 3 Jeff Keighley joints that we get a year now. He's been doing this for 8 years now. It's kind of hard to believe. We're not going to go through and do a full recap. If you want that, you can go over to the website. I went ahead and live blogged everything, all the reveals, all the trailers, all the stuff that got announced today. So if you're looking for a more sort of comprehensive overview, go there. Check it out. But Matthew, what stood out to you personally from Opening Night Live?
This was a pretty decent show, I thought. There was a number of things here that it stood out to me. I'll skip the ones that we'd seen a lot of before, and maybe just drop new trailers, things we already thought looked good. But for me, the big ones were a couple of the new reveals. So I'll start with Noticefall, which was the big trailer from Hoyoverse, known for Genshin Impact. This looks nothing like Genshin Impact, honestly.
Yeah.
So this was pretty an eye-catching trailer for me. It looks like has some serious Elden Ring inspiration, just with some of the imagery and character and monster designs that they've got going on here. I mean, given that this is, from the creators of Genshin Impact, who knows what this game actually is when it comes out? I don't know. I mean, they didn't really seem to show actual gameplay, but I think it's interesting. Yeah,
I wasn't expecting this from them.
Yeah.
They've really carved out this lane of, and really gacha games in general, right? And not to say that Noticefall is a gacha game, but I kind of am assuming that it will be one. So it'll be interesting to see how they connect the sort of Elden Ring inspiration with the whatever monetization scheme that's sort of powering it. But yeah, they've really carved this lane out in a more overtly anime style for a lot of their games. So yeah, it was really, really interesting to see them lean into something more dark fantasy. It caught my eye too. I'm skeptical because of, knowing what their business model is and just generally not being a fan of the gacha games. But I'm willing to let myself be won over by it.
Yeah, if nothing else, this was an interesting reveal here, and is one that I'll want to keep my eye on in the future, even if it ends up not being something that, ultimately sets the world on fire. I thought the way that this was revealed here and the trailer that they used to do so was, pretty interesting overall.
Matthew, you and I, we're both Rainbow Six fans, so Rainbow Six Tactics was one that jumped out to both of us. This, I found out, this is developed by the same team that did the Mario plus Rabbids games. So it is, think XCOM style, isometric camera angle strategy, turn-based strategy, but you are running a Rainbow Six, team. So it's really cool. They got the different, they're bringing in different operators. There's, the RPG like progression that you've come to expect from some of these games. This was announced in the pre-show, and I feel like it was one of the more like interesting, one of the more like exciting announcements for me personally.
Yeah, I saw some people kind of clowning on this one online, and I could not disagree more. I think that like, and I really what I want to shout out about this most of all is that even though like they're continuing to do interesting things with the Rainbow Six IP, they're using the success of Rainbow Six Siege to leverage that to do other interesting things. Like we got Rainbow Six Extraction a couple years ago, which it was I think moderately decently received. I thought it was great. I loved that kind of co-op feel and the fact that they did something sci-fi with the IP that they really stepped outside of the norm there. And now we're getting a tactics game, like an XCOM style game using the operators from Rainbow Six Siege. So I think
Right.
I always talk about how I want to see like IPs leverage to do interesting things rather than just keep rehashing the same thing. And this is kind of what I'm talking about. I don't know how good this will end up being, but it looks good, and this is what I want to see more of for IPs like Rainbow Six.
I think the tactics angle is a more apt fit for the Rainbow Six license than something like Rainbow Six Siege. That franchise has had the, like the history of like the more tactics and more tactical oriented gameplay. So I think, just switching it to a, turn-based format makes sense for them.
100%. Yeah.
Talk to me about Loaf Song.
So Loaf Song, this one was right up my alley here. It looks kind of like probably like a dialogueless indie game, sort of in the style of Inside or something like that, where you play as like a little guy in the ruins of some huge landscapes that has kind of like a brutalist architecture to it, and you're discovering a hidden language essentially that's been buried in this civilization. You're sliding around on sand in ways that look a little bit like Journey. You're solving puzzles. It seems. And it's all got a very striking aesthetic to it. So this stuff is catnip for me, and this one was always going to be one that was my alley here, and it didn't disappoint.
Yeah, I think the art style is really what stuck out to me. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's really cool use of color as well. And yeah, I mean, I like these kinds of games. I'm not like a sucker for all of them, but Inside is definitely one that has stuck with me after all these years, and I'm getting big Inside vibes from this one. Also see the Journey inspiration as well. So yeah, I'm excited to see this one and check it out once it comes out as well.
For sure.
Another one that we both agreed on, and I'm also very excited for here, is Afterworld. This is coming from the Crusader Kings 3 developers. So think grand strategy, you're sort of zoomed out on a big map and navigating not only raising an army and sort of managing your country, but also like more political behind the scenes dealings and things like that. So they're very robust simulation games. Their Afterworld is sort of taking that formula but adapting it to a post-apocalyptic, post-nuclear, it's almost Mad Max like, the way that it sort of came across in the trailer, version of the United States, where presumably you're tasked with rebuilding the United States up to its former glory, but in this sort of post-nuclear setting as well. So this looks awesome. I have sort of been looking for an excuse to get into a grand strategy game. Like I've sort of been flirting with grand strategy games. I've been getting big into like city building and things like that, simulation games. But I think this is sort of the right alleyway or entry point for me, with just the themes and the setting and just everything really here seems like unique and original.
I agree. Yeah, I think this Mad Max, and it is very. I mean, it's very clearly Mad Max inspired here in some ways with the aesthetics. But in others too, it looks a little bit like, not Mad Max. Like there's definitely different factions with their own different art styles and vibes going on here. But yeah, I think I'm with you in that I've the Paradox games have typically not been my thing. Like, the Crusader Kings series and the Hearts of Iron series I think are probably their biggest or most well known ones. And just by nature of when they're set and the kind of fiction that they're selling, or that kind of that era is just not really my thing. And so the post apocalyptic Mad Max style of the idea of having tribes, and when you're rediscovering technology and in a post apocalyptic wasteland seems much more thematically like something I'm just more predisposed to liking here. So yeah, this may be finally what it takes to get me into a Paradox game.
Sticking with Paradox, my game of the show, arguably, the thing that got the biggest pop from me in terms of all the new reveals, Lego Skylines. This is a city builder, but with Legos. It's being developed by the same team. So the team that took over development of City Skylines 2. So yeah, city builders have kind of been my gateway drug into the Paradox games, where deep simulation, but think SimCity, where you're managing your city. This one is just Lego inspired, and I think it's a match made in heaven. Obviously, right? Like, I think Lego is just such a strong IP. It's fun. It's I feel like it'll be the perfect gateway drug for my kids to get into these kind of games. Like, they've watched me play City Skylines and have expressed interest, but those games are just too complicated. So I know that this will probably be a little bit more kid oriented, but then also like just having the Lego customization and being able to play around with it like that looks really appealing to me.
Yeah, I think this did look cool. It had a good trailer. I think the big thing for me is going to be how well they integrate the Lego, branding and like the things you associate with Lego, like the actual Lego pieces, into a city building type game like this. I think
Yeah.
if they can merge that well, then that's going to be a total winner.
I do want to shout out Iceflake Studios who took over. Like I said, for those of you who aren't familiar with the development of Cities Skylines, the original developer Colossal Order, who also developed and released City Skylines 1, worked on City Skylines 2. It released it notoriously in a really buggy, sort of messy state. Even though there was, it was really just sort of ambitious, and they sort of, you can kind of tell like the ambition was there, but I think they might have went a little too high. Long story short, Paradox switched them out with Iceflake, and already it seems like they've made an impact on City Skylines 2. But then, going ahead and giving them the keys here to take a brand new game with the Lego IP, I think they're going to do good stuff with that.
Yeah.
Moving on to another one that interested me. This is a brand new reveal. This is Elta Defy All Gods. This is developed by Afterburner Studios and it's published by Focus Entertainment. This is just a straight up PS3 style action adventure game. You've got like, it's, platforming, you've got combat, wall running, like it's all in this like sort of futuristic sci-fi, really unique sci-fi world. Yeah, like it's got like this really cool sort of premise to it. It reminds me a lot of, games that we've seen this generation that we do compare to, like the past generation, like Pragmata, and other games that have come out recently. So yeah, this is one that I think has potential to sort of reach that same level, if it's done well.
Yeah, this one also caught my eye too. I think this has a lot of potential. I like it almost looks like a kind of like a Darksiders type influence.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was a Darksiders game at first.
Yeah, it looked good. The action that they showed off, especially like near the end of the trailer when you got like some what appear to be more the in-engine gameplay, along with some platforming sequences and like a massive boss. It looked like. I'm this one looks great to me as well.
Last one for me. This is Pony Island 2 Panda Circus. wild game title, but this is the follow up to Inscription. I can't like all I know. I haven't played Inscription all the way through, but I know that it goes places. And Pony Island 2 Panda Circus feels like it is just the game that is the place where Inscription goes. You know what I mean? It is just buck wild. There's a bunch of YouTubers that are starring in this and lending their likeness to this game. I honestly didn't get a great sense of what the game even is. It just seems like a collection of really strange mini games with just like I don't know. I don't even know how to describe the sort of tone that it's going from here for here. It's like a weird sort of like horror, but not quite horror, but funny. Like it's a strange reveal, but it caught my attention.
It was definitely strange. Yeah, it has like a lot of different art styles, both in like 3D space, but then also pixel art or like other retro game console styles. And the what's depicted in them is like all wildly different. Like some you have like somebody like what looks like a point and click adventure game. Another one is like a 2D side scroller. One is like the guy looked like he was in like an overworld or something. And all of them, like I said, in different art styles that look like they would be from completely different games. So I don't know. Yeah, and then there's the real, like you mentioned, the YouTubers who were shown in there that are just like, it's just video of them acting characters. So I don't know about this. I'm with you. I played some Inscription. I did not finish it either. This is probably one that I will like watch a playthrough of or something. Because it looks nothing if not entertaining. But who knows what this experience is actually going to be like.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be very, very streamer friendly. That's Dan Mullins Games who is developing and publishing this, the original developer for Inscription. Matthew, we'd be remiss, like there's a bunch of games obviously that got trailers, re-reveals. I'm super stoked for Control Resonant. I would argue that Metro 2039 is my most anticipated game behind Grand Theft Auto 6 at this point. So yeah, lots of stuff that we've sort of seen at this point. But one thing that we knew about ahead of time, but hadn't really seen or heard anything about is the latest expansion for The Witcher 3. That's right, we're getting a new expansion for The Witcher 3 in 2026, which mistake me if or correct me if I'm wrong. It's 11 years after the Witcher 3 first came out.
Yeah, so technically it'll be next year that we get the new DLC. So it'll be be 12 years. But yes, it'll be. I wouldn't be surprised if they go for like something like 12, like very close to 12 years, if not on the dot, which would mean it would launch like next May, I believe. But we'll see.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, talk me through your feelings, man. What did you think of this new DLC and plus the announcement of the remaster?
Yeah, the remaster I did not expect, but I think it lines up because somebody had noticed that back when they announced the new DLC, they changed the system requirements for the game on Steam, and people were like, "Well, why would they be doing that?" So that kind of explains what was going on there. It's definitely going to get me to reinstall the game again. As far as songs of the past, they still like kind of played it close to the vest. Like they didn't give too much away here. I think we still don't really know what the story is here, but do you really need to know? You kind of know what at this point what Geralt's going to be doing. The kind of performance that you're going to get out of him, and the kind of monsters he's going to be hunting. So I think whatever it is, it's going to be good. They're not gonna bring back a Geralt for a DLC 12 years after Witcher 3 for something that feels tacked on or unimportant. So I think there's a little bit of trust involved here, in the fact that they still haven't given us a whole lot to go on, but I ultimately do trust them, even though this is being co-developed with an external studio. I think I think we have every reason to be confident that this will be good.
Yeah, The Witcher 3 over the years I feel like it's gotten a bad rap. I think people like to hate on the combat and some other things, which to CD Projekt's credit, they're addressing and introducing some fixes here in the remaster version. But yeah, I mean, people like, I think that's a little bit of revisionist history generally, because like The Witcher 3 was excellent and still to this day I think remains one of the best open world RPGs that you can play, if you haven't played it. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they're cooking up. I haven't played any of the DLC, so I think this gives me a great example, or a great excuse to run through all of the DLC. But yeah, I'm excited for this one. Can't wait.
Certainly. Yeah, for sure.
Those were like our highlights of the show. But Matthew, what did you make of the show overall? Keeley, like I said, he's been doing this for 8 years now. I think he's gotten into a good flow. But what do you think? What did you make of this year's show?
I think this showcase here is definitely the also one that he does of the three.
Yes.
Like it's always been the least momentous and with the smallest reveals, which makes sense. I mean, Summer Game Fest is obviously taking the place of E3, and then the Game Awards has obviously become its own huge end of year Game of the Year event. And this one's kind of just like, the one, like the passion project of the three. But with all that being said, I think that this slate of games that they showed here is better than I think that I can ever remember them like being here at a Gamescom. I could be wrong, but this one certainly stuck out to me in terms of how many reveals they were, how many new games were shown off. And just the sheer volume of like the quality of games that we got here. It was pretty impressive to me, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would agree with your assessment that this is the most, I'd say the best, the best that like a slate of games has looked at one of these, because I also agree that this is the most, like, this could have been an email of the presentations.
Right.
And yeah, there's definitely some I similarly to like we criticized with the Game Awards being really lengthy and running very long, like I think 2 hours is just a lot for the caliber of games that are being announced here. Another thing too, that like it was really obvious that at least at this show that there was a huge influence of Chinese, Korean publishers. Like you could tell that, like I posted or messaged in a Discord at some point talking about this. I would wager that 85% of Keeley's financing came from like HoYoverse, NCSoft, and other Chinese and Korean developers and publishers. And another thing, I guess to sort of follow up on that thought was like just this idea that like a lot of them looked kind of cookie cutter, copy paste. I was looking around on online as well, and like the general sort of consensus here seems to be like, yeah, like these games look cool, they look stylish, but like they're all sort of going for the same thing. They're kind of all going for the same audience. What did you make of the like, I guess the increased presence of those style of games?
I think it's interesting because they don't disclose which of these, like which trailers and games that are shown off are paid to be there and which ones were selected, by Jeff Keighley. I think, you like to take like Tides of Annihilation. Tides of Annihilation is what it's called, right? Yeah. Like that one, I don't feel like that probably paid to be there. Like I think that was probably a selection, or I could be wrong, but it didn't feel like one that paid to be there.
There's a lot of juice behind that game for sure.
Right. And so, but you take some of these other ones and like, I don't know. Some of them it's easy to say. Some of them you think that maybe okay, this paid to be here. Like it's they roll directly into this trailer after another big trailer, kind of like as if it was like tacked on or something. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I mean, ultimately, I think it's at least notable that that the Chinese and the Asian in general, like the companies are willing to both fund game like this many games like this and pay for them to be marketed to what I would imagine is like a predominantly Western audience. So I think it if nothing else, it shows how great the investment in gaming is from that part of the world right now.
Yeah, you can tell that like they're going hard with, just marketing their games, like, and to Keeley's credit, like he always sort of touts that these events always have a global audience. So, not every game, like we always come out of these events saying like not every game is going to speak to every person. And so I think that when you're talking about a more global audience, like that can definitely be the case. But yeah, it's just it's interesting to know, and like we said, this is the sort of like redheaded stepchild of the shows here. Like it very much could be a situation where the financing here rolls into some of the other events as well and get some of the bigger things. But yeah, I mean, I think overall, right, like the show was one of the better ones. Definitely one of the better opening night live. So shout out to Jeff Keighley.
Yeah, it was a good show.
All right, guys, let's talk about some actual video games that are out now that we can play today. I'm going to start with Mortal Shell 2. This is the sequel, of course, to Mortal Shell. It's developed by Cold Symmetry and published by PlayStack. And so this is an action RPG, Souls-like difficulty, motivated game here. For those of you who weren't familiar with Mortal Shell, the original came out in 2020. Kind of had like a middling reception. It's got a 76 on OpenCritic, so there's definitely some positives, right? Like, as a game that is sort of influenced and inspired by Dark Souls, people shouted out the combat, the art designs, and visuals, right? Like, it's got a really cool, unique art style. And really the only sort of like critiques that were, that I found with the original were that like the world building and the story weren't quite as strong. I wanted to pull an excerpt from the IGN review of Mortal Shell 1 because I think it's a good sort of like tone setter for like how I feel about Mortal Shell and Mortal Shell 2. So they wrote that Mortal Shell is an extremely loyal Dark Souls homage with just enough clever new ideas to make fighting through its gorgeous world feel like something more than a rehash. And that's ultimately like a great way to describe how I feel about Mortal Shell 2, where it's like it is just good enough to be on like the thumbs up side of like, yeah, this is a good worthy like recommendation for people who like these kinds of games, right? And to sort of clarify too, I'm not the target demographic for this style of game. Like I'll maybe play, one or two of these every 3 or 4 years, right? Like I'm not playing every single one of them. I beat Elden Ring, which, I'll give myself a pat on the back for. And I will say that Mortal Shell 2, I would say, goes for more of an Elden Ring spin. So the main difference here between Mortal Shell 1, Mortal Shell 2 is that this one is more open world, similarly to Elden Ring, where you can kind of choose how you want to progress through the world and what order you want to tackle things in. I think, like I said, I think it's just good enough and sort of just, unique enough to stand apart from not only Dark Souls, but some of the other Souls likes that have popped up over the years. And I think the big thing that stands out to me in that is the combat itself, right? Like instead of the patented stamina bar that Souls and From Software have introduced, this is a much more fast-paced game. You're dashing around. You essentially, there is no stamina bar here. The only real thing that you have to manage is a sort of posture meter. This is a parry game, so you're going to be parrying enemies. Enemies are going to be parrying you. So the more you sort of miss a parry, that posture meter will fill. Once you break, you are left stunned, and essentially at that point you get knocked out. But another thing that the Mortal Shell games do to differentiate themselves from the Dark Souls games is the shell itself in the name. So you inhabit this shell, and it sort of counts not only as a sort of shield, but actually has the abilities and the powers that you're going to be using in the world. And so a cool thing that they incorporate into the combat is the shell if you lose your health, you get knocked out of the shell, you don't die, and it kind of functions as a like a one last chance thing. You get enough hits, and you can revive your shell and heal up, and without having to do a run back necessarily. So that's a couple of things that they do to sort of differentiate themselves. And having not played Mortal Shell 1 and coming into Mortal Shell 2 and experiencing that, I think that stuff is really, really cool. I think I almost prefer the style of combat in Mortal Shell just because of how fast it is and how responsive the blocking and how generous the parry windows can be sometimes. It's still very much a Souls-like game. You are very much gonna have to get good, but I still feel like the parrying is balanced in a way that makes me feel like I can do it. The only downside is that like there's some weird balancing and tuning issues, really just kind of across the board. Famously, there was or infamously, I should say, there was an open beta where the feedback was really sort of negative around the game's difficulty, and a lot of people said that it was too easy. And I feel like they overcorrected here in the full release. Now, caveat this: they are updating the game. They're constantly patching stuff, like almost at a Crimson Desert level, where they're constantly tweaking difficulty and stuff like that. So this stuff is changing, I think, a lot more rapidly than other Souls games. All that to say that there are weird balancing issues where like regular Joe Schmo guys will run up to me and two-shot me, but then also like the big giant guy with the giant cleaver will two-shot me as well. So it's just inconsistent in that way. And then there are also just issues with like I said, it's a parry game, so if you are even slightly off on your timing, there are just a lot of these unbreakable combos that you end up getting chained and stun locked and either knocked out of your shell or killed. So a little bit of frustration there. But I think overall, like I do come down on it more positively than, other Souls and Spires games that I played. I don't know if I'm gonna, see this one through to the end. I'm just not built for these kinds of games, but I can at least appreciate the attempt here.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think, talking about the difficulty spikes first, I mean, that is kind of the way these games are at launch, and it's actually kind of why I don't like playing games like this when they first come out. Because even the FromSoft games, they usually launch in a state where it's a little bit overtuned, and I think it's somewhat intentional because they don't want people who play at launch like to just like blow past enemies, and complete the game at a level that is easier than what they want. I think they'd rather tune it to be a little too hard at launch and then scale it back to be easier, if they find that that's necessary. I remember that being the case with Elden Ring. And then, they'll also like fix things like if there's like a certain build or shell in this case that's totally broken, they'll nerf it or whatever. But I think it's like a little bit of damage mitigation to kind of like preserve the experience for people who get in at the very beginning. So like a couple years ago, I played Lies of P, which I personally consider to be the best non-FromSoft Souls-like game currently that I've played, at least. And I played that like I think 6 months after release, and I had a much smoother time with the difficulty because it had patches and stuff to kind of fix the experience. So your experience here is sort of validating my decision to not play this one at launch because it can be real frustrating to kind of hit those things. But
for sure,
going back to the game itself, I mean, like you talk about the pace here. The game that actually reminds me of this maybe more than like Elden Ring is like the Neo games, which are in and of themselves sort of Souls-likes, but they're faster as well. I'm not sure if you ever played any of those or how you would compare them to those, but just it seems like somewhere in between Neo and like a Souls game to me.
Yeah, Neo is, I think, more apt. I've only dabbled in Neo 2 like briefly, but it is, I would say it is similar. I think Neo 3 might be a better comparison because isn't which one did they introduce a more open world in? I think the one that is the more open version of Neo, I would say is probably a better one-to-one comparison for Mortal Shell 2 because it's open-ish. But yeah, there's also like there's very clear lanes that you have to go to get through, right? Like it's not like Elden Ring where it's truly open, where like the terrain is gonna block you in ways that you can't necessarily navigate around.
Yeah, you're not just like sailing on your horse across like an open expanse or anything like you would in Elden Ring. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's that is the more what I would call the more traditional Souls experience. And I mean I've watched a number of streams on this game, and it looks like it's hitting all the right notes for fans of the genre. So I mean I guess like I want to kind of talk more about the shells in particular because that is what
Mhm.
really is the more that's the unique aspect of this too, you know. So what would you say, like digging into the shells a little bit, like how many of the shells have you gotten? Have you gotten all of them, or which one would you say your favorite is, or just some more thoughts on the shells?
So there's a shell that is exclusive to the game's tutorial, which I really liked, and I have only gotten one other shell besides that. So there are 8 shells total in the game, but similarly to a like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, like you got to go out and find it in the world. So like the best comparison I'll have for the shells is that it's like that random sword you'll pick up in a FromSoft game that you'll look at the stat requirements and it's stats that you haven't been building into like at all. And you can tell like, oh, this
Mm,
is for someone who uses magic, right? And I think where Mortal Shell aims to do is avoid those types of moments where it's just, hey, you found the shell, it's got everything you need to play this sort of play style. I wish that I was able to find more before we recorded this to give you a better idea of like how I feel about them, because the one that I've got I'm not crazy about. It's a I forget the name of it. They all have like unique names, but it's she's essentially got a like a whip that grabs enemies and drags them to you and also applies like a shock effect. The only issue I have with that ability is that it is unclear. One of two things can happen when you use it. You can, like I said, pull an enemy towards you, or with the larger enemies, you'll pull yourself in and lunge at an enemy. And it is unclear in some cases which enemies that effect applies to, which in a game like this where positioning matters and whether or not you're jumping into battle matters, that can be really frustrating. Like there a good example before, I was playing earlier today, like there was one moment where it's like, I mean, like a woman in a cloak, right? Like a very normal sized, normal looking enemy type in these kinds of games, and she was the type that I ended up pulling myself towards, and
mm.
I pulled myself into a group of them, and it did not work out well for me. So stuff like that is weird, in addition to like the balancing issues. But I do at least admire and appreciate the fact that they aren't making you level up different stats. Like when you do level up, it is just like, your max health goes up, your shell health goes up, and like some other, effects will go up depending on what level you're going up to. But other than that, you're not really worrying about strength, you're not worrying about your endurance, or all that stuff is handled by the shells themselves. So once you find one that you do like, it's easy to mix and match and like equip them at will, so you can change between play styles without having to respec and do all of the sort of stuff that you have to do that can be kind of cumbersome in these games. So it encourages experimentation in a way that I think some of these other games don't always do, and I appreciated that.
It's interesting that they're not exactly like giving you much to choose from at first. Like you think they would give you like two or three, baseline ones to
Mhm.
kind of pick the one that you like the most, rather than sticking you, it sounds like, just with one, and then kind of really making you work for any of the rest of them. How is that? I mean, does that decision feel like it's does it how, is that vibing with you, or like do you feel like you wish you had some more options right from the get go?
Yeah, I wish I would have had more options from the get go. I think, even if they make a point to, the one that you have in the tutorial, like essentially is lost or dies or something like that. Um, and so like they make it clear that when you're starting the game, you're starting from zero, and yeah, you have to go out and find your first one. And yeah, the one that I happened upon isn't a great fit for my playstyle. So I wish, like, I think having like the option of one or two, like they set it up to where you are like sort of the chosen one in this story, right? And like there's an entire like cult or religion or a group of people who are behind you, who are like supporting you and wanting you to succeed. So like I feel like the basis is there, like the justification could be there for like a, hey, like, you get to pick one or a one or two or three, different sort of shells to start out with, and then the rest is sort of up to you. Like I would have appreciated a little bit more choice in that, because I like to, in the Souls or in the FromSoft games, right? Like I do like to adjust my stats based on the sort of challenges that I'm running into and the difficulties that I'm having. So being able to adapt and go from there is a plus for me, versus this. I feel like I'm trapped in with what I've got until I find something else.
Yeah, like I'm thinking about like the Devil May Cry styles or whatever they call them. Like, like you have
Hmm.
your gunslinger style or your
Right.
sword style. And then you have the more advanced ones later that get a little bit more like weird, that kind of make you challenge your play style. It feels like they could have done something like that here, but I guess we'll have to see and how some of those other shells are received, and how you feel about them as you get a little bit further in. The other thing that I would ask is, like, I know you didn't play the first one, but how does the scale of this game feel to you? Like the original Mortal Shell, I think, was a much smaller experience. Like
Hmm.
it wasn't quite like the entire, you know Souls like length. Most of these games are a bit longer. Where I think the original was only like a little over 10 hours or so. Um, and with this one being, it sounds like a full length game, 30 plus hours or whatever. How does the scale feel to you? Like, does it feel like there's any growing pains in terms of adapting this shorter game for a much larger one? Is there any kind of signs that they, you know, like reused content, or is this all pretty
Hmm.
much, does it feel good, and like that, like everything is pretty um fleshed out and unique across the board?
Yeah, I think the world is awesome. This is a good opportunity, I think, for me to shout out the art direction and environments again, which I would put up there with Sorrows as like some of my favorite in a game this year. It feels like really cool dark fantasy, but then there's like an organic nature to a lot of the architecture and buildings, and obviously a lot of nature out there in the world. And I feel like I haven't experienced a lot of the environments either, but like some of the ones that I've run into already have been really, really cool and unique, very heavy metal inspired as well. But yeah, I mean, I think going back to your question, like it's I think it does the open world stuff well enough. I think, like it is cool to be able to, have another one of these games, similar to Elden Ring, where like if I feel like I'm butting up my head against a particular, path or something, and running into issues or not making any progress, I can just turn around and go in the opposite direction and try something else. So that is cool. Another thing I will shout out is the fast travel system, which I would argue is like the most heavy metal fast travel system I've seen in a video game, where like it's this really cool animation of you phase into like a light beam, and then it just like blasts you down onto the ground, like where you where you're traveling. So
Nice.
really cool fast travel system. But yeah, I mean, I think the open world is well done for the most part. I think going back to the sort of balancing issues, I think there's like one thing I noticed when I was looking online was that people were saying that the distance between the beacons, the campfires that you're finding and resting at, that serve as like a sort of rest and reset point, they can be a little bit more like they're a little fewer and far between. So I think that could potentially be an issue. I haven't butt into that a whole lot, but I still am, like I said, a pretty early on in the game. One thing I will say that I can add to that is that I feel like there's just sequences where I think just the number of enemies in between those beacons can be a lot. Going back to that example of where I tried to like hook the woman NPC character and charged into her, like that is like halfway through like a sequence where you're fighting like at least 24, like 24 enemies, I would say, varying sizes and capabilities. It's like it does feel like some of these, like they just have too many things to fight and deal with, and like there's sequences where I feel like I'm just better served running through them, which always feels bad in these kinds of games. So I think there are some growing pains overall, but I think overall like the open world is well done in this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that is again, that sort of ties into like the balancing thing, which is like, maybe if those enemies weren't so tough, the distance between those bonfires or whatever they call them wouldn't feel so strained. But yeah, I mean, I think this overall this sounds pretty good. Like I said, I've watched a good number of streams, and it looks like it's well made and everything. And the art style does look very cool. So this might be one that I check out, like I did with Lies of P down the road. Once it's got a few balance patches and quality of life updates and stuff, I may check this one out.
Yeah, that's Mortal Shell 2, y'all. It is out now. It is on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series consoles. And yeah, I mean, I think it's very much a game that I think 6 months from now, once they get the kinks ironed out, it'll be a game well worth playing through and visiting. So yeah, more to come there. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to talk about another brutally difficult open world game, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. We'll be right back. And we're back. Matthew, we got another difficult, brutal, open world, just like unforgiving kind of game here in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. Specifically, the Cost of Hope expansion. It's the first expansion that's been released since the game came out, but then also a 2.0 update. So this is, for those of you who aren't familiar with S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, developed and published by GSC Game World. It originally released in November of 2024. I guess the sort of general consensus around it at the time was that like there was something there, right, as the follow-up to S.T.A.L.K.E.R, the sort of highly regarded open world RPG that it was. But it was kind of marred by technical issues and bugs, things like that. I should note also that GSC Game World, Ukrainian developers, so development was obviously impacted by the ongoing war that's going on over there. So it was one of those situations where like you knew when the game was coming out that it had just had a troublesome development cycle, and they were just thankful to get it out the door. But now they're here with the 2.0 update and the first DLC, and so they're essentially fixing a lot of those issues that were introduced in the 1.0 release. So you've got updated visuals, like upgraded lighting and foliage, a bunch of new weapons, attachments, gear like binoculars. They also introduced custom difficulty modifiers, brand new weather effects, and like I said, a bunch of bug fixes. Uh, and yeah, and then on top of that, obviously there is the new Cost of Hope DLC, which is, it promises dozens of hours of new content, a couple of new factions, two new regions. Yeah, this is kind of like the big sort of 2.0 relaunch of the game, so to speak. We've both been playing it. Matthew, you've put a lot more time into it than I have. I've kind of been bouncing between this and Mortal Shell 2. But talk me through your experience with Stalker 2.
Yeah, I mean, so I played this back when I played a small bit of this back in 2024 when it first launched. I booted it up. I played a few hours, maybe 3 hours or so. Played it long enough to know that there was really something there that I enjoyed. I didn't really experience any huge bugs or anything with it, but I did experience like just general poor performance on my computer, which was at the time brand new. Um,
Mhm.
and so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll let them optimize this a little bit. And it kind of launched at a weird time. I don't remember exactly what else I was playing at the time, but I remember that I wasn't going to have the amount of time to pour into it that I would really want to anyway. So I stuck it on the shelf for a while. And I've been just kind of waiting for a reason to go back and dig into this game that I knew that I would like. And lo and behold, here finally we have the first DLC and or the first expansion, I should say, and the 2.0 update, which overhauls the engine and some of the graphical aspects of it. And I think, I mean, I went back and started playing this a little bit before the 2.0 patch dropped. So it was like 1.7 or whatever. And I was already at that point seeing like much better performance than I saw at launch, which was great. And but yeah, with the 2.0 patch, I think I sent you, I set up a couple save points before the patch dropped where I could take comparison screenshots to see, exactly how different it looked. And the graphical updates in the 2.0 update, like it looks great. I think
It's amazing.
yeah, they don't really even just like upgrade like the lighting or anything. Like there are whole textures here, there are whole assets that are different. To the point where I actually feel like if you're like a stalker purist or something, you could like there is something that could be like they may be upset. Like there's somebody out there, and I don't think it's the majority of people out there, but there's probably a small minority of people out there who prefer the old patch. Like it looks a little bit grungier, maybe.
Yeah.
Like if you like that kind of thing for your stalker game, you might like that. But I think for everybody else, like it looks way better. The foliage has way more detail. The way the lighting kind of refracts and reflects off of surfaces is much better. And the whole zone feels much more alive. Even with they added some new weather effects like fog and light rain, which are
Yeah.
both awesome. I mean, really, speaking to the game as a whole, this is a game where you spend large swaths of time running across the landscape. This game does not
Mhm.
have a robust fast travel system, so it wants you to travel across the land, to kind of carve your own path and kind of tackle whatever kind of diversions the game throws in your way. Um,
Yeah.
and so the appearance of the world and the way and the things you're doing in it and the way it looks like is integral to the experience. And so I really feel like this is an important update and one that they did a really, really good job with.
I can imagine someone being upset about the visuals, but I think still like the upgraded visuals in 2.0 still retain that grunginess. But then it just makes it so much more immersive. And like this is honestly like the most engrossed I've gotten into a world like this. I mean, I think in a long time, probably something like an Elden Ring. I'm sure I'm skipping over something there, but it is such a like really detailed and like you know peaceful. Like peaceful is not the right word, but like it is, calm, like it just appears calm. But just, yeah, like just adding in all the different, effects and like just, yeah, all the different, like the weather systems, everything that's out there trying to kill you. Like it is it's not an easy game to navigate by any stretch of the imagination. What do you make of the difficulties in Stalker 2?
I think the difficulty is inconsistent, and I think the like custom difficulty option that they released is an excellent addition. Unfortunately, for some reason, I don't know why they did this, but the other built-in difficulty levels you can toggle between at any time. But the new custom difficulty level, it says you can only set it at the start of a new game for some reason.
Yeah, I was infuriated when I realized that, because I agree with you on the balancing issues. And I wish that it gave me the option to sort of toggle that, because I didn't even know that was a thing that, and honestly, I wanted to give it, a shot on the sort of base difficulty as well. So yeah, I'm glad you called that out.
Yeah, it's frustrating because I'm playing this across both Xbox and PC. The default difficulty level, like veteran or whatever it's called, like I cannot play at that level with a controller on the Xbox. Like it's the level of precision that you get from a controller is just not enough to be able to perform at that. So when I'm playing with a controller, I end up having to drop it down to rookie. And then when I'm on my computer, I'm playing on like the normal difficulty. I think the difficulty it's a little it's different than what you imagine. Like I never played the original Stalker trilogy, so I wasn't really. I heard that these were always like hardcore games, but the difficulty that is like it's more of a survival sense to me rather than like a like combat sense. So like I don't find that I am dying like a huge amount, but it does kind of challenge you in terms of like resource management. Like I'm finding I don't run short on healing items or med kits usually, but what I do run short on is like ammo for the guns that you're carrying. Like it really wants you to like, it gives you ammo for a bunch of different kind of guns, and then but you may only be carrying 2 kinds, so you got to find a gun of a different type. And the weapon durability system is really unforgiving. Like the weapons degrade so quickly.
Oh my gosh.
So what ends up meaning is that your gun is jamming in the middle of combat like extremely frequently. So and then like the economy of the game, which means like to repair these, your armor or your guns that are degraded, you're getting charged, like you're getting robbed. It's like highway robbery what they charge you to repair some of this armor and guns. Like it's insane.
That's a theme in the game, man. It's just like it feels like everyone's out to just screw you over in that game, and like they really drive that point home, both in the with the in-game economy, but then also just those random diversions that you run into the open world, man. Like it is unforgiving in that sense.
Yeah, and I think I have like so. And I get I've come to terms with like part of the experience that they want you to have is they want you to be that you're not going to be rolling out with your ideal gear every time you go out. Like that's just that's not what they want you to do. You want to be they want you to be feeling like you have to kind of put together a little bit of a makeshift build in some situations,
and improvise once you're out in the world as well.
Right, and I think the improvisation, like you're talking about, like the encounters that you get out on the road. I think that is like the bread and butter of this game. It's not the main story. It's not like any of the side missions. Like it is the experiences that the game emergently generates for you and that you put yourself into while moving around from point A to point B. Like it allows you to create stories without even trying to. Like, there was a time when I I completed a quest and then I was like, okay, there's this other quest over here that I have. Like I could just pop over there and do that, or I could go back and turn this one in and like, repair my gear or whatever. And I was like, it's not that far. I'll go over there and I'll just knock it out. Well, like I start heading in that direction. I run into some bandits. And then like I'm halfway through fighting those bandits, and then we all get beset upon by like mutants, and then I'm fighting them. Then the weather turns and like there's an emission happening, and I'm having to like sprint across the land to get to a safe house to try to survive. And this whole like situation is like cascaded out of control. And that's just like one example of
Yeah.
something that happens like this. And like
I've
the
got examples like that from like less than 10 hours into the game, you know?
Yeah, and it's really impressive to me how, and I've played like over across everything. I've played over 30 hours at this point, and it's still generating new ways to impress me with the like kind of emergent gameplay scenarios that arise, as well as like, you know, new kind of cool areas within the zone that are artistically different than what you've come across in the past. Like, you know, it's hard to convey, like, yeah, there's a lot of swampland here. There's a lot of, you know, grass and dirt and like, you know, it can look, you may think it looks all kind of samey, but then you go to some of the different sub-regions within the zone and you see just how different it can be, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
They do a good job of like the you know, post-apocalyptic architecture of like keeping it grounded, but then yeah, giving each area its own sort of like unique flavor.
100%. And there's like there's a real beauty to it too. Like it's not just all
Oh
like
yeah.
run down, but it's all very well rendered, and just like the game is a screenshot magnet for me.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
yeah, I mean, like I think I've really fallen for it in a way that I always figured that I would once I put in enough time to get there. The difficulty, I think, you know, I like I said, I would tune it differently. I really would like the opportunity to try out those custom difficulty levels so I could get it right, both, you know, for use with a controller and with a mouse and keyboard. But even just kind of toggling back and forth the way that I have been, it's been a really fun experience for me so far.
I agree with that. Talk to me about the DLC. Have you touched on it at all? You know, I know you mentioned the story isn't really the selling point, but is there anything in the DLC that you're seeing so far that would suggest that they're, you know, addressing that?
So it's interesting the way they did this DLC. So it takes place during the like alongside the main campaign. So you can't have hit
Mm-hmm.
the like the point of no return for the main campaign, which I have not gotten to anyway. You it's split into two. So um, you can start it basically as soon as you leave like the, I'm not going to call it tutorial area, but like the first subsection of the zone that you start in. As soon as you can
Right.
leave that, then you can start the DLC. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I just got the notification or like the quest beginning, you know, dialogue for it.
right. And so, and you can kind of do what like the starting missions, and then it reaches a point where it's like, okay, you know, we'll contact you when we're ready or whatever. And at that point, you have to progress up to a certain second point in the main campaign when
Got it.
when it will unlock the rest of that storyline. So I've done everything up to that first point, which was maybe like 5 or 6 hours of content. Um, and I like it. I think the narrative is stronger than the main campaign. I think I think for reasons that I would say are similar to Cyberpunk 2077. I think there's a lot of interesting parallels between this game and Cyberpunk 2077, but specifically with the DLC, I think like the Phantom Liberty, it all took
Yeah.
place in Dogtown, like one small new zone that they put, or you know, 90% of it took place in this one new section in Night City that they added for the DLC. And that additional focus that having it all in one place, and you know, with a smaller set of characters, it really kind of, it elevates it. Like it's more focused.
Mhm.
There's less fluff. You know, they're not finding reasons to just kind of send you off to the middle of nowhere just because to
Right.
chase some MacGuffin. And that really worked in Phantom Liberty's favor. And it for the, at least for the first half of the DLC, or I don't know if it's the half, but the first part that you have access to, it worked in its favor as well. You know, you got to really know that one of the new areas that they added, which is the Iron Forest, which I think is
Yeah.
one of the cooler places within the zone that I've been to so far. And a smaller cast of characters allowed you to get to know them better than really any of the characters in the main campaign so far. So I've been pretty impressed with it. I would not put it on the level of Phantom Liberty in terms of like storytelling, certainly not in terms of writing. It just goes for something different. You know, Cyberpunk is very about like the drama and like being like the sleekness of you know what you're doing and your experience in Night City, whereas Stalker is obviously all about like the grittiness of the zone, the very like military focused. And so within that context, I think it's very successful at what it's trying to do. And yeah, I'm definitely very interested in seeing how it wraps up. I'll be, you know, going back to finish that as soon as I get to that point in the main campaign.
One thing we haven't talked about is, obviously this game has a lot of different comparison points to another well-known open world post-apocalyptic RPG, and that's Fallout. So now that the sort of comeback story is complete for Stalker, how do you think it compares to something like a Fallout? Let's say Fallout 4, since that's the most recent single player example. And, would you recommend Stalker 2 over that? Or who would you recommend Stalker 2 for versus something like a Fallout?
I think anybody who is like a fan, considers himself a fan of the Fallout series should check out Stalker 2. It's definitely a different kind of game. This is not an RPG. It's you're not leveling up any kind of stats. It's all about the gear you're finding. But the experience of it is somewhat similar. You know, you're in kind of what is, it's not a post-apocalypse in Stalker, but you're in an area that feels like you're in an apocalypse. You know, it's been abandoned more or less, and there are some similar themes to what's going on with the characters there. And, you have mutants, in both, that have been changed by radiation from various sources. So yeah, I think if anybody's looking for that kind of Fallout experience of, walking across the wasteland and like coming across some like crazy stuff that's out there and kind of in a you against the world scenario, it's definitely worth checking out Stalker 2.
For sure. That's Stalker 2, guys. It's out now. It's PlayStation 5, Xbox Series consoles, and PC, and also available through Xbox Game Pass still, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, guys, that is gonna do it for our show tonight. Thank you guys so much for joining us and killing time with us. Don't forget that you can listen to past episodes and find us on your social network of choice at timekillerspod.com. Don't forget that you can be part of the show. Let us know whatever you're killing time with, or if you've got a hot take or question, submit it to ask.timekillerspod.com. And don't forget to subscribe to us on whatever podcast service that you do use, and don't forget to leave us a review. It really helps us with discovery and getting the show out to more people. Matthew, anything you want to say to the nice folks before we log off?
Watch out for those anomalies.
Watch out for those anomalies. We will see y'all in the next one if I don't die 20 more times between then. Have a good one.